Right there. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. This morning, first I want to congratulate Dan Andrews and the Victorian Labor team on an outstanding election result on Saturday. It is a remarkable thing to topple an incoming government in its first term, and Dan Andrews and the Victorian Labor Party deserves great credit for their campaign. In particular, their courage in supporting public transport, Melbourne Metro and the removal of level crossings rather than the east-west tollway. That was an act of significant political courage, and they've been rewarded at the polls for displaying that. Secondly, there's no doubt that this election result is a great rebuff to Tony Abbott. The federal Liberal government and its budget proved to be a very significant electoral liability for the Victorian Liberal Party. I spent Saturday on the polling booths and indeed spoke to many Victorians in the lead up to the state election, and there's no doubt that both Dennis Napthine and Dan Andrews were seen as relatively mild-mannered characters, professional and predictable and measured in their comments, and across this relatively tranquil landscape, Tony Abbott came across as an out-of-control Tyrannosaurus with his cuts to health and education, his attacks on pensioners and students, the cuts to the ABC, to renewable energy and the like. So his values are not in keeping with many Victorian values. Victorians support action on climate change and the renewable energy target. Victorians understand the value of higher education and don't want to see students with degrees that are unaffordable. Victorians support manufacturing industry, and so things like the closure of motor vehicle companies and SPC Ardmona have been very damaging in Victoria, or at least the federal government's refusal to support SPC Ardmona has been very damaging, and it's significant that the electorate of Shepparton appears lost to the coalition. So this is a significant rebuff to Tony Abbott. He needs to learn from it. And the first thing he needs to learn from it is that he should work with Dan Andrews in supporting public transport, not inciting the incoming Labor government to break its promise in relation to the east-west tollway. There was a time when Tony Abbott said that keeping your promises and keeping your word was very important. In his own federal budget, he's shown that he doesn't think that's very important. And even worse, now he shows that he's not listening to the voters, that he's listening to large corporations and inciting the Victorian Labor government to proceed with the east-west tollway when the Victorian Labor government has said absolutely 100% that they are not going to do that. The third thing that I want to observe is that rapid population growth is political poison. And this is the second Victorian government to have lost office in the space of 4 years. And the point about this is that in the early years of this century, Australia's migration rate more than doubled, and for Melbourne, we've seen population increase now at the rate of 200 people a day, 1,500 people a week, 75,000 people a year for some time. And the planning, transport, environmental and cost of living consequences of that were very damaging for the former state Labor government, and they failed to successfully cope with those and lost office. And they've proved to be equally intractable for the new Liberal government, and they have now lost office in a period of just 4 years.
When it comes to some of the warnings about the budget this morning from Deloitte Access Economics, possible write-downs of $30 billion or so for the budget, does Labor need to also go out and start planning, start getting some policies about how you would bring the budget back to surplus?
Well, the first observation I'd make is that during the term of the previous Labor government, we were constantly mocked and derided whenever the revenue forecasts and the budgetary outcomes didn't match the forecasts. And you had the opposition then saying, there'll be no excuses and there'll be no surprises, and mocking the government for its failure to balance the books and for bringing in budget deficits. So from our point of view, it's a bit rich for them now to be leaping on excuses if the outcomes don't fit with their projections. I think that there are things that this government could do to improve its budgetary situation. It's had an extravagant paid parental leave proposal, and they should abandon that. It could do a lot more in terms of multinational tax avoidance, the tax avoidance by large corporations who shift profits offshore. And I was talking a moment ago about the East-West Tollway. They showed extravagance by handing over $1.5 billion to the Victorian government for a road that's not going to be built. So there are plenty of things that the government could do to help balance the books without attacking poorer Australians through visits to the doctor or making student fees unaffordable.
Right, but they're the things Labor have been speaking about for the last year or so. None of that's any sort of new savings measure. So if we do see the figures we're likely to in MyEFO, and Labor continues to block the other measures you alluded to, GP co-payment, you will have to sometime soon come up with alternatives, won't you? There's a new situation, MyEFO. Labor needs to respond with some new measures, don't they? Proposals?
Well, the proposals that I've talked about would generate savings or would generate improved revenue, and we believe that the government should explore those measures. And there are certainly things that we can do to help balance the books, but we don't need to attack ordinary Australians, and you don't need to be breaking election promises.
So you think that the proposal on the table for Labor will be enough to get savings needed currently in another $30 billion or so in the next years?
Well, I think that there are a range of measures, and obviously we will work on those, and we'll be putting forward budgetary alternatives during the life of this parliament. Thank you.